What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded, and today we are going to discuss a looming railroad workers strike, which can happen Friday. The impacts of it and what we might be able to do as union activists to help out. But first, don't forget the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, drop a comment, and share these videos. Got to spread the word. According to the Washington Post, this is everything that we need to know about the looming railroad strike. Freight railroad companies and unions representing workers have been locked in a dispute over pay and working conditions. And come Friday, the conflict could spill over into a logistical crisis, affecting not only commuters who rely on the railway to get to work, but also the nation's energy supply and drinking water, as if we don't have enough problems already with our drinking water. While a presidential board has urged a compromise, two of the largest unions have not agreed to the deal, which could prompt a major strike or the railroads to lock out passenger rail agencies and workers. The impasse is tied to disagreements between management and labor over sick time and penalties for missing work, a politically challenging stalemate for President Biden, who aims to advocate for union workers but has prioritized untangling the nation's besieged infrastructure in the COVID era. Sick time. Notice that it's not a wage dispute. It's a conditions dispute. People fail to realize how important conditions are. They're vital. So let's continue. Here's what you need to know about the potential railroad strike. Why is a strike looming? A crucial issue preventing an agreement is some of the largest carriers' points-based attendance policies that penalize workers up to termination for going to routine doctor's visits or attending to family emergencies. Conductors and engineers say that they can be on call for 14 consecutive days without a break, and that they do not receive a single sick day, paid or unpaid. Now imagine that. 14 days straight you're on call and do not schedule a family emergency within those 14 days. Because if you have a family emergency and have to miss work, that's a strike against you, and according to what they're saying, a fireable offense, potentially. So imagine that. 14 days straight and you can't have an emergency. Who plans emergencies? There's a quote here. All we're asking is folks to be able to go to routine doctor's visits without pay, but they have refused to accept our proposals, said Dennis Pierce, president of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. Way to go, Dennis. Way to stand up. The average American would not know that we get fired for going to the doctor. This one thing has our members most enraged. We have guys who were punished for taking time off for a heart attack and COVID. It's inhumane. Can you imagine that? You get punished because you got a heart attack? When could the strike begin? A federally mandated cooling off period ends Friday, which opens the possibility of a strike if employees refuse to go to work, or a lockout if the carriers refuse to let workers do their jobs. The nationwide rail shutdown is set to go into effect after midnight on Friday, and the Biden administration has already begun preparing for a potential crisis, but the disruptions are already unfolding. Labor and management have been at an impasse over difficult issues such as sick time and penalties for missing work. If the parties can't come to an agreement, the lockout would mark the first such strike in about 3 decades. How might it impact you? Amtrak has started to warn passengers that interruptions will begin Tuesday on its national network. To avoid possible disruptions, the passenger railroad said it is pulling trains on 3 long-distance routes. These initial adjustments could be followed by impacts to all long-distance and most state-supported routes, Amtrak said in a statement. These adjustments are necessary to ensure trains can reach their terminals prior to freight railroad service interruption if a resolution in negotiations is not reached. If a strike isn't averted, commuter lines that run between major cities and suburbs could be affected, since those routes often operate on freight tracks which would not be available to passenger trains. How many of y'all knew that passenger trains and freight trains share rails all over the place? It would make sense. But how many of y'all knew that? A strike could have a significant impact on retailers who rely on freight rails to transport inventory from the ports to warehouses and distribution centers. The shutdowns would cause a domino effect. Retailers will miss their shipping and pickup dates, leaving cargo in limbo without a place to go. According to Jonathan Gold, the Vice President of Supply Chains and Custom Policy at the National Retail Federation. It adds to the ongoing congestion that we're facing within the supply chain, he said. And that all adds additional costs that folks haven't planned for. See, they always pass the cost on to the customer, which means onto workers. You see how this all ties together, and why I always say it's not left and right and it's up and down instead. It all ties together. The ones who suffer are the workers, always. Some railroads are starting to put in place shutdown procedures in anticipation for Friday. And even if an agreement is made before then, it takes time to reverse those procedures. The potential here could be significant on the economy, especially for everybody who's relying on the rails for both imports and exports, Gold said. When was the last railroad strike in the U.S.? The last railroad strike took place 30 years ago when railroad workers with the International Association of Machinists walked off the job. Most of the country's freight railroads shut down in response to push Congress to pass legislation imposing a new contract on workers. President George H.W. Bush at the time said that the strike ought to end the day it begins. The impact of the shutdown was so severe that after just 3 days, Congress intervened to ban strikes and lockouts. Railroad strikes have long played a significant role in American history. Railroads were so important to the nation's economy 100 years ago that a strike could shut down the whole country. Nelson Lichtenstein, a labor historian at the University of California at Santa Barbara, said railroads previously set the standard for work. In the late 19th century, all the great strikes were railroad strikes, and they had a revolutionary flavor to them. Railroad strikers burned down Pittsburgh, shut down Chicago. The 8-hour workday was won by the railroad workers' strike, he said. Union members in the United States generally have the right to go on strike to win Union members in the United States generally have the right to go on strike to win pressure campaigns to offer strong contracts. But the Railway Labor Act of 1926 imposed barriers to striking, including intervention mechanisms from Congress, because of the potential economic impacts of these work stoppages. This is why we always go back to the U.S. is a pro-labor economy, in a sense, because Congress understands that if the workers are so displeased that they strike, it is bad for the country because it hurts the economy, it hurts the supply chain. And since the money's not flowing, who gets hurt the most? The big boys up top. That's how they make money. They make money by moving it from here to there and gaining interest. And when the money ain't flowing and the goods ain't moving, they can't make money. So Congress and the government understands that it's best to negotiate in a fair way and come to a fair settlement instead of trying to bully unions. Railroad strikes generally revolve around work rules rather than wages, Lichtenstein said. From the point of view of management, a crucial aspect is whether employers can control costs by forcing workers to work when they want. Historically, Congress will intervene and the president will put forward legislation that adopts what the latest mediation panel says. Last-minute deals happen often. The threat of a real strike will get management making concessions, he said. But here he says it right here. Railroad strikes generally revolve around work rules rather than wages. So again, this is about quality of life issues. And quality of life issues are important because, dude, we only get one chance at this. You get 80 summers on average. 80 summers on average. And now that's going down. I think now it's like 76 summers on average. That's your lifespan. Quality of life is probably the most critical thing. Time, what you do with your time, is probably the most critical thing. And these companies don't understand it because CEOs don't view time as that significant unless it's their own time. Everyone else's time is just money to them. What would happen if the railroads shut down? In addition to rattling commuters and spoiling cross-country travel for thousands of Americans. If a strike happens, the disruption could deal a major blow to the economy. A strike would shut down nearly a third of the country's freight, industry players have warned. A freight railroad shutdown could devastate Amtrak operations. According to the Association of American Railroads, about half of commuter rail systems run at least partially on tracks or rights-of-way owned by freight railroads. I did not know that. The Biden administration is scrambling to shepherd a deal while forming contingency plans to ensure key products carried by rail, including food, energy, and health products, will still reach their final destinations. Senior officials are looking at how highways, ports, and waterways could be used to offset the disruptions a strike would kick off. As for the Biden administration, I would behoove them to pressure the railroad companies to concede, because giving time off, even if it's unpaid time off, allowing someone to be able to be there for family when they're sick or when something happens, is just the decent thing to do. It's not even like this pampering thing where, you know, a lot of folks love to sit there and say, oh, these new age workers, they're all, you know, soft and they need to be babied. This ain't that. This is a quality of life issue, and it's something that we should all support. So President Biden should be pressuring the railroad companies. Now here's what you can do. Call your representatives, call your senators and your House of Representative members, and share your support for the railroad unions, for the strikers. Share your support for them. Also, be on the lookout for any strike funds that come up to help those railroad workers that strike after Friday. If they do go on strike, look for the funds that pop up to help them, so that we might be able to send them some money so they can still pay their bills while they're fighting the good fight. As this article said, you know, the railroad workers were at the forefront of the labor movement 100 years ago, when the labor movement was really gaining a foothold and traction. Railroad workers were key components to that, and so we should always stand in solidarity. Not only that, you should always stand in solidarity with all workers. But yeah, that's what's breaking and what's looming. It's looming not too far off. We're already here at Tuesday. I mean, shoot, Friday's just a few days away. So yeah, be on the lookout. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Keep in mind that the fight is not left and right, never has been, never will be. The fight is up and down, and it's going to take solidarity to win always. Also, each one teach one, get out there and reach one. Peace.